It is time to have a discussion about legs in general. But before I do so, I would like to point out a couple of things. Firstly, today's footage is not reflective of Robocraft's present balance situation. Sometimes it is good to take a glimpse back to remind ourselves of how movement parts, weapons, and bots in general used to perform prior to certain changes over time. And old footage isn't necessarily bad footage, of course, so do enjoy the gameplays. Secondly, I shall be linking to a community post where various stats as of January 2023 may be viewed and discussed, both in terms of evaluating them as well as to provide your thoughts as to the direction that you think that you might like to take them. Also, I shall at some point be linking to another community post where I outline the directions that I would like to take legs toward, and hopefully also outlining any thoughts shared by you, the community, even if that should nudge legs down a different path. With that out of the way, let's go over legs. In Robocraft, one finds mech legs, sprinter legs, and insect legs. Mech legs are tanky, heavy, responsive legs that lumber about the battlefield in 8 directions. They're able to jump pretty high and are strafe capable. Most of them have a very large hitbox. It is typically the case that mechs are made of heavy blocks, as in the bots themselves are made of heavy blocks, often made tougher due to the inclusion of helium blocks, for better and especially worse. There just isn't really a reason to use lighter parts upon a mech. They just don't provide any real benefit. Sprinter legs are modestly faster, modestly less heavy legs that are also able to move in 8 directions. They are also able to strafe, but their key ability is the ability to move to forward leap at a significantly faster speed. They also have a large hitbox. Effective sprinters used to be made of most kinds of materials, but are presently constrained to the use of light blocks and similar materials. Insect legs are presently the lightest and fastest of the leg types in terms of their base speed, and can also move in 8 directions. They are also able to jump pretty high and are also able to strafe. They are very tanky and able to crawl up surfaces pretty well overall, compared to other leg types at least. They also feature a large hitbox. Effective insect bots can be made of most kinds of materials. All 3 of these movement types are closely related to each other, at least thematically, and fall under the domain of being ground movement parts. Yes, they can be made to fly with the help of other movement parts, but that has more to do with the added parts rather than the leg parts themselves. Well, that covers 3 kinds of pure movement part bots, but as many players know, there are a multitude of hybrid bot types that emerge from mixing and matching parts, and so it would do well to cover these also, at least to some degree. The most common accompaniment to a leg of any type, but especially mech and sprinter legs, would be the hover. With regards to legs, a hover provides a convenient backup movement for when the legs get shot out, and in this regard they are more valuable to sprinter legs, especially glassy T3 sprinter legs, than mech legs in general. But even mech legs end up needing to literally fall back upon them. They can also reduce the odds of getting tipped over, since they have a certain stabilizing effect upon these parts, when falling for instance. On the other hand, hovers impact the jumping capability of a bot, especially so for jump height. Whether this is a pro or a con depends on the player and how much they value jumping high. A lower jump also means that such a bot is less likely to get hammered by flak, but on the other hand it could potentially make a bot slightly more susceptible to plasma. While it reduces jump, hovers can at times improve a mech or sprinter's ability to climb slopes, And in the case of sprinter legs, hovers can enhance the control that a player has over sprinter leap direction, while a true sprinter would maintain a single direction throughout a leap. Well, that's hovers. Hover leg bots are frequently further augmented with other kinds of movement parts, most especially those that allow for flight, so rotors, wings, and rudders, and of course speed boost parts and so on. All three of these impact the jump characteristics of the leg parts. What rotors primarily have going for them is that they do enjoy full strafing capability, whereas aerofoils generally need to turn a bot in order to gain sideways momentum. Rotors tend to be more popular with mech legs and insect legs, with their main role being repositioning, while in the case of aerofoils, the aim is more to get between positions faster. They flow. For a number of years, one of the more commonly played bot movement configurations in competitive play would include sprinter legs, hovers, aerofoils, and booster parts. They were and remain effective, what some people call metas, sprinter play, basically. Of course, there are other kinds of parts that may be combined with legs in order to enhance or change their mobility in some shape or form. Tracks or wheels or even skis can serve as a backup movement option type, and the main advantage of using these is that if they aren't set upon the ground, they do not impact the movement characteristics for the legs. The legs will jump as if the bot were a pure leg bot. So there we have it, the three kinds of legs that exist in Robocraft and the various variants that exist beyond that. Now what? Before I continue, I did almost forget, legs can technically be mixed with each other. It's not very common, but you can technically have mech legs, sprinter legs, and insect legs mixed in a singular bot. It can result in some interesting characteristics, like for instance, having insect legs on the front can result in a cartwheel motion when jumping, for instance, or allowing such a bot to climb more efficiently in some cases, climbing up steep slopes and such. So anyway, now what? Well, the next logical step for me was to visit DigoBooster's master sheet of Robocraft part stats and to get thinking. As an aside, I've linked DigoBooster's sheet in the description, as it is a very useful source of information about the full set of Robocraft parts, both as they exist today and also stats for the past, which is pretty handy. The actual stats for the leg parts are also linked below in a separate link, and I could and have heavily considered going over what all the stats do, but that would make for a rather boring explanation, so instead I will focus upon the interesting things or the interesting aspects of those stat fields. So, firstly, mech legs and sprinter legs have practically identical stat block structures, meaning that it is not unreasonable to presume that if one type of leg has access to a value, then the other probably has access to it too. This applies to long jump scale, which basically is the forward speed adjustment that legs get when they jump, which is what, in the case of sprinters, is what players call the sprinter leap. And this also applies to other fields like landing delay, which forces legs to pause upon landing following a jump, and which is presently set at 0, which is why you probably didn't know this. It just doesn't exist at this point in time. I'm also fairly sure that this applies to health boost, Health boost is a percentage value that boosts not only the health of the part itself, but the health value of all parts upon a bot. Health boost was done away with when damage boost was done away with, several years ago, and this took the form of setting the health boost of mech legs to 0. Now, at no point has it ever been mentioned that sprinter legs do have access to health boost, and in my view, health boost really isn't something that I'd expect to be associated with sprinter legs, but I felt that it was an interesting thing to note. If tank tracks as a part can be made to fly, and I'm not saying they can, but if they could, then I would want to know about it. I would like to know that such is a possibility, even if it makes absolutely no sense. Possibilities are power. Now, a further attribute worth touching upon would be the agility carry limits of parts. Basically, in the stats, a weight is specified, and that is taken to be the point at which that part's agility values reach their highest level, their best, and do not get any better if the weight of the bot continues to fall below this. At the same time, that weight specified, multiplied by 10, is taken to be the heavyweight agility limit of a bot, which is where the agility values of the part reach their worst, and similarly get no worse as weight continues to be increased, which I feel is great because otherwise it would be very bad news for megabots, for instance. But moving on. Well, that covers mech and sprinter legs. Things are a little different for insect legs. I must admit that the various stat fields for this part perplexed me for a very long time, and they still do to a point. And I must further admit that my understanding of a fair few of these fields is less solid than I would personally like, as it is through understanding that one can proceed with any confidence. With that being said, insect legs stats outline the height at which legs are angled relative to their mounting points, or so I think that that's what those particular height-related fields refer to, or mean. So the actual posture of insect bots could be adjusted via these values, technically, again if I'm interpreting that correctly. Aside from that, one finds a host of forces and dampening forces related fields, where forces fields would be, well, not force field, but fields that relate to forces dictate the amount of directional force that they exert upon a bot when control inputs are received by the bot, or the game I should say, while dampening forces, or damping forces, seem to be the leg's resistance to changes in forces, and in a sense I think that this is what results in insect legs being sticky, for instance. Furthermore, insect legs have a literal stopped force value, which itself suggests that when the bot is at rest, it will further exert forces to prevent it from moving. This also sounds like stickiness and gets me to think that it is a bonus stickiness for insect legs when the bot is not in motion, or possibly when it's not receiving inputs. Interesting stuff, but again I would say that that is how I'd expect these fields to impact movement, but I cannot say for absolutely certain. It would require experimentation. Well, this was kind of a crash course to the back end of legs in Robocraft. All of the various fields mentioned, with an exception of part weight, are among those which FreeJam could modify. Any ask of FreeJam to make an adjustment is not to be taken lightly. We have seen, update after update, what it is like for part values to be adjusted irresponsibly, and without so much as a reason given. It results in imbalances, and these feed into a long-standing problem that the game has long since been hamstrung by, the problem of matchmaking exploiters or farmers, whom are enabled through the existence of imbalance. As such, any adjustments to be made to any part, including legs, should be made with consideration and with explanation. Transparency and accountability are, after all, long overdue. Mistakes, especially where understanding is imperfect, is understandable. Less understandable is the gouging of other aspects of balance in an effort to avoid backtracking on bad decisions made. However, I do run the risk of going off on the so-called balance Discord again, and that will not do. So moving on. To get back to the balancing of legs, I would like each and every one of you to look upon mech legs, sprinter legs, and insect legs, and ask the questions. Where does this leg fit in? What role should the part play on a bot that it is included upon? How does this movement part measure up against others, such as air for instance? While it may be asking much for some viewers, I would like you to try and think not on behalf of how you would want the part to serve you, rather, better would be to think of how the movement part serves Robocraft as a game, and, if this is somewhat of a twist, think in terms of what would be in the best interests of the parts themselves. What is best for a mech leg, an insect leg, a sprinter leg? From a game design perspective as well as a player user experience perspective, one also needs to take into consideration what would carve a unique niche for the parts, what would be enjoyable or at least satisfying to use. A further consideration is the current overall superiority of air movement parts over ground movement parts. When this video continues, I will share my overall thoughts concerning the direction that I would like legs to take. Do feel free to pause the video should you like to think about the balance of legs without my influence perhaps. So have you given it thought? Continuing in 3, 2, 1. Let me start by saying that if it were up to me, that I would not hesitate to clone each and every one of the legs currently in Robocraft, perhaps even other parts, such that there would be, for example, twice as many legs, for instance. Each T5 mech leg will become 2 T5 mech legs, and would share the same qualifying aspects as normal T5 mech legs, including sharing the same tech tree slots, for instance, except that they would have different stats. It is also how I feel about parts in general. Cloning and statting is a relatively easy way to quickly enrich the game in ways that I don't think that most people appreciate. Most players certainly, and I'm not sure about FreeJam, whether they've even given it much thought from their end. However, since part cloning is not really an option for as far as I'm aware, I need to think more in terms of how these three types of legs fulfill their respective roles. Ironically, it may be easiest to start with insect legs. It is generally seen as desirable for insect legs to be able to stick to surfaces with little fear of falling off them unintentionally. Considering that insect legs are more likely to shimmy down walls while the bot is turning, or otherwise adjusting, it is my view that all dampening values could use an increase. Stopped force also for good measure. Even if this were to move in the right direction towards fixing insect legs, it is my view that it is unlikely that this would make it desirable for insect legs to lose out much in terms of either base speed or health. With respect to mech legs, I have chosen to address several issues. Firstly, mech legs as a whole have taken an overall increase in part health. This to help ensure that a mech on the battlefield can better trust its legs not to be what lets it down. Secondly, in response to others' observations that there really isn't a point to run anything other than heavy blocks or similar upon a mech, I have endeavored to make agility changes that allows for the meaningful existence of light mechs, with little sacrifice made on the part of traditional heavy mechs and megabots. Thirdly, in service to the creation of a light mech class, adjustments are made to the long jump scale field such that not only do heavy mechs jump a lot less badly than they presently do, but lighter mechs jump better, resulting in a mild sprinter leap, yes indeed a sprinter leap, that has height to back it up. However, heavier mechs will begin to pause briefly upon landing, a very fair price to pay for the improved jumping. Mech legs take a reduction in speed boost. Speed is not their thing after all. It'll be interesting to see how that works out. Lastly, we have sprinter legs. So, with regard to sprinter legs, a couple of issues are also being addressed. Firstly, health, primarily the health of T3 sprinter legs, which presently get one-shot by weapons a tier or even 2 below them. Secondly, base speed gets increased so that, they get a legitimate up on mech legs in that regards, while their speed boost is adjusted to be double that of mech legs for the same tier. Thirdly, the agility carry limits get pushed up to a less unreasonably low level. This alone is not going to be enough, and so agility values are also being adjusted to help ensure that true sprinters, on the heavy end, remain playable. After all, unplayability is bad for viable build diversity. Well, that's about it for the moment, and now over to you. Did you come up with ideas concerning a plausible direction that legs could be taken upon? What are your thoughts concerning the proposals for legs outlined here? Did you like something? Did you dislike something? Let me know your reasoning for such. Let's have a discussion. Hey there, Bloom. YouTube finally says hi. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I will meet you there, and, of course, thank you for watching.